Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over to Anne to get us started.
Okay, hello, nice to meet you all. Just a couple of things before I start as well. I'm obviously outdoors, so it's for some reason it's been glorious and sunny first thing this morning, and now there's a bit of a breeze. So if it's making a noise on the audio or anything, just let me know, or let Chris know, and I'll, once we've done the outdoor demonstration bits, I can go indoors if that's a problem. I'll just as well introduce you to the cameraman. Bear with me. So that's Jim. Say hello, Jim. He's going to be filming in a minute. And there's Basil. Now Basil generally hates gardening, but he does like compost. So we'll probably see a little bit of him. He likes compost because our house backs onto fields, so we quite often get field mice in the compost, and he lives in great excitement of that. So what we'll look at today is first I'll explain the different types of composting. We'll have a little look at containers and what you can use, good chat about contents and how to turn compost, and then we'll have a little think about uses. I'm not really an expert on compost. I've just been making it a long time, so a lot of what I've learned has just been from reading, watching TV programs, etc., and quite a lot of trial and error. You could probably tell from my accent I'm a Yorkshire lass, and what we like is anything for nothing. And one of the reasons I sort of love composting and got into composting was there's all the waste, so veg cuttings and everything else, and you can actually turn it into garden gold. Plants love it. It really feeds them, and so it's really is something for nothing. In fact, it's better than something for nothing. It's something for something you'd throw away. I know that you can put your stuff in your garden bin that your council will take away. And some stuff I still, even though I'm a composting nutcase really, I love it, some of it still does go in the green bin. Well, ours is green. I'm not sure what colour your bin might be, but then that's because there's two different types of composting. There's something called hot composting and cold composting. Might have different names, but they're the names I know them from. So hot composting is when you generate quite a lot of heat within the actual materials, and when you put your things into your council bin and that's taken away, that's usually gone for hot composting. And what happens is it's shredded up very fine, it's turned regularly, there's a lot of air in there, and they very carefully manage the different materials in there, and that generates a lot of heat. That heat will kill off any sort of diseases, seeds, and sort of things that you don't particularly want in your compost. You can do that sort of composting at home, but it's incredibly labour intensive, possibly not the safest thing to do, because again, unless you know what you're doing, you can put, as you probably know from your composting and refuse collection, you can put things in there that I'm going to say don't put in your own composting. What we're looking at today is cold composting. It's much less labour intensive, and it's what is normally done in your back garden or on your allotment or wherever. Any questions so far? Or Chris, do we need to leave questions to the end?
I think the way to do it is if someone puts a chat in there, if you stop periodically, then there's no questions right now, but if, like I said before, if anyone has a question, put it in the chat. Nick will hopefully be able to reply to the questions in text, so you can see that as well. So we should be all right just to carry on rolling.
Okay, one problem I have got outdoors is the lights reflecting on my screen, so I can't see particularly well. So I'm not ignoring you if anybody puts a question up and I don't see it. Just someone will need to let me know. Okay. Right. So let's have I'll just hand over to the cameraman, and then we'll have a look at containers as a starter. Is she okay? Are you filming? Are you filming? What
Yeah,
can you
it's
see?
all good. It's all good.
Okay. Right. So the types of containers I've got are these big plastic things, but you don't actually need these. You can even compost straight onto the ground. The advantage of composting straight into the ground is you can just make a little hole and start to put your compost in there. It's free. You can build your compost up exactly where you're going to use it, and there's not a great deal of work in doing that. The disadvantage, of course, is you've got compostable material just sitting around on the ground or just below the surface, and also the ground that you put in the compost in, really you need it to rot down before you start to use it. So what I have are the plastic bins. Again, you don't, sometimes the council actually give these away or sell them off fairly cheaply, but you can make them yourself as well. You don't need to purchase anything. So Nick will be looking at wooden ones. One of the luxury versions of the 3 bins side by side, and what advantage that gives you is the pallets are excellent material for making compost bins. So 3 pallet bins side by side actually makes turning much easier. But if you're composting on a much smaller scale, I've just assembled a few things here that you could possibly use. So we've got some old sort of buckets. Again, if you're a very small scale, just chop the bottom off or make some holes in it and then plonk that in the ground, and that will work perfectly well. Or even something like this. Again, I was sort of thinking one of the things that compost does is it attracts a lot of wildlife. So it could be great fun if you've got kids or anything to decorate something like this, and make it as a sort of a bird restaurant. Other ideas, old plant pots or an old basket. The important thing is that the compost bin really needs to be on soil, on the ground, and that will allow the worms and all the other creatures and creepy crawlies to get up and into the compost and water to drain through. And so if you are using plastic buckets or anything like that, drill a few holes in the bottom or chop the bottom off and then plonk it on the ground. Okay? Ideally, you need 3 bins. You don't need 3 bins, but ideally 3 bins is helpful. Bin number 1 is where you put your newest material. Bin number 2 is the next stage where it's really starting to rot down. And bin number 3 is where it's nearly ready to go. And the advantage of 3 bins is, we'll look in a minute, you turn compost. That helps to get the air, get things rotting down. And if you've got the 3 bin system, you can just keep moving it along. I have to say, when I first started, I only had 1 bin. And these big plastic things, what they have is, you might need to come around here a bit, Jim. What they have is one of these doors on the front. So as the compost starts to rot down, you can pull it out of there to use and just keep filling at the top. Again, the disadvantage of that is it's difficult for turning. Now, pop that back in for now. Okay, these bins also come with a lid. So again, if you need, where I am, it's very, very dry at the minute. We've hardly had any rain, so I've not got the lids on my bins to allow the rain to get in. Again, they do come with a lid. It keeps the materials contained, but as I say, the wooden pallet versions are actually much easier to use for the turning. Okay, any questions so far? No? Let's move
Not
on.
yet.
Okay, let's have a little think about material. As Chris said, I've put a list together of things to put in and not to put in. Now, I have a system where on my kitchen window ledge, I have one of these little plastic tubs that mushrooms came in. and I just throw all my material. I suppose you'd call it rubbish, but it's not, it's garden gold really. So as you can see in there, we've got tea bags, some carrot peelings, some rather limp parsley. There's also a couple of little bits of lemon in there, lemon peel. I like a hot water with lemon first thing in the morning. Some people don't say put citrus in because the worms don't like it. I do put that in. I don't use a lot of citrus though, so I think if you were having a lot of oranges or something like that, it wouldn't be good, but the odd little bit the worms don't seem to mind. Because my kitchen's not near where I keep my compost bins, I also have this rather ugly looking bucket, which is where we throw all of this stuff. That goes in there, and then every so often Jim gets asked to cart it back round to the compost bin. Okay, then when I'm out weeding and collecting stuff around the garden, I tend to use 2 buckets as I'm doing that. There's materials that I wouldn't put in. So in there we've got things like the dandelion clocks. The problem with putting things like that into your compost is cold composting isn't going to kill these seeds off. So once your compost's all nicely rotted down and you start spreading this around the garden, what you're actually doing is spreading all of these weeds around the garden. So you can, if you want, put that into plastic bags and really let it rot down. But again, you've got to be sure that you've rotted it down completely. I'll be perfectly honest, I just put that in the council bin collection. Let them rot it down and use it that way. Other garden material, obviously grass cuttings and bits of twig and things like that. I'll talk to you in a second about the different types of material and layering. But if you put in things like these twigs in, they need to dry out really. So I usually put them in a separate pile, and then they're easier to scrunch up and break down. It really is important that as much as possible, your garden material is in small pieces, because when it's in small pieces, it will actually break down faster and the composting will be much faster. Okay. So, I'll come back to talking about material a little bit more in a minute. I'm conscious that Jim is filming and his arms get tired, so we'll just have a quick look at turning, and then I'll sit down and take over the camera. So as I say, we have compost bin 1, 2 and 3. We've got 1 and 2 here at the minute. My compost bin number 3 is actually over at the other side of the garden. What I tend to do is compost bin 3 gets put where I need the compost.
Could you just repeat that? The wind blew over you there, so I couldn't quite hear what you said there.
Okay, so compost bin 1 and 2 are here, and my compost bin 3 is down at the other part of the garden. What I do is I put compost bin 3 where I actually want the compost, because that's the compost nearly ready to use. That way then I can spread it around where I need. As you can see here, this is where my compost bins were earlier, and this is where my beans are going to be planted in the not too distant future. The compost is actually, once the bin's moved, it's where I need it to be. I'm not having to move it about. Although some of this is still not quite ready, so we'll plastic label there. We'll go back into compost bin 2. So turning compost. This is the bit where Basil's sitting down there. It usually appears. Turning compost is literally, as it says, turning it. So I turn this off. And we have got and this is actually, this is really interesting. All sorts of little bits of plastic. I try and avoid plastic in the garden as much as possible. It does get in there, so this is a good place to sort of collect it all for either future use. So those little white labels, I always reuse those, or for recycling. I'll just put my gloves on for this as well. It's a shame Sorry, this is where I'm going to really sound like a compost nerd. This does smell really nice. It smells really sort of earthy, and it sort of has a, you just want to use it sort of feeling. As you can see, this is actually now getting quite fine. There's some big bits in there, but I wouldn't worry about those. This is virtually ready to use, if not ready to use. Then there's other things in there. I've been clearing a piece of turf, so that's going to take a bit longer to rot down. You can see as well, there's a mixture of sort of dryish stuff in here that's still needing to rot down. So what I'll do from here is the nice ready to use, or nearly ready to use stuff. I don't need it just at the minute. Pop it in the wheelbarrow, put it in compost bin 3, and let that just carry on rotting a little bit further, ready to use. The stuff that's not quite ready, this will go back into compost bin number 2 for a little bit further rotting. So when you put your compost bin down, good idea using these plastic ones, so that the wooden ones are better in terms of not having to move them out.
Mum, can you just repeat that again, please? Sorry, the wind really isn't our friend today.
Okay, so one of the things that's a good idea to do with these plastic bins is just scrape the soil away a little bit where you're going to site it, so that you're almost siting it into the ground a little bit. What I've found is, I keep going on about mice, I'll talk a bit more about mice in a second. That does stop the mice getting in quite so much, but it also stops things coming out. We have quite a lot of birds around our garden, and the compost bin is a lovely little microclimate, so they will often pull things out of the bottom to get at the insects. So it just keeps things a little bit more contained while it's rotting down. So then once that's re-sited, all of this not rotted stuff will just literally go back in. Now, as you're doing this, what you're doing is actually creating a little bit more air into the composting material as you throw it in. And that helps speed up the breaking the material down, and actually speeds up the compost making. Now, as I said, it's been really, really dry here, and you can see this in my compost. I have actually watered it, but it's still very dry. Normally at this point there would be lots of worms and insects in here all coming out, and what usually happens is, as soon as I start doing this, all the birds line up. They start looking for all the bugs and nice juicy things for them to eat. So, as I say, literally one go back in there, and that will continue to rot. Now, compost bin 1 is usually the most unpleasant part of the job. So this is all fairly fresh material. Now, I have to say, the smell of this isn't as nice as the other compost bin. But what you can see there is this top layer where I've been pouring things in, still pretty wet. There's no mice in there, Basil, honestly. But the stuff down at the bottom here is now starting to rot down. So this will move from compost bin 1 into compost bin 2. And some things in there. Again, this is much wetter, a few little bugs and whatnot, partly because the material's fresh. It's coming from this bin, from this bucket here, into there, and then starting to rot down. Okay, any questions so far? Right, I think what I'll do then.
There was Nick's answered a few, but I have one myself. If you're using one bucket, how does that work? As you turn it the same amount of times, or will it take longer? Is it a more efficient way of doing it with 3 bins, or?
It's a much more efficient way with 3 bins. So if you were just on a small scale, what you could maybe do, let me just get some buckets here. is have sort of three systems. So you know, chop the bottoms off your buckets. Your first bucket is the one that is getting used the most, I would say. And once it gets into stage 3, it's actually rotted down quite a lot. So as a bucket full like this will actually come down to probably, once it's rotted down, will probably fit in something like that. So I would, first bucket here, so throwing all your raw material in. Ideally, if you can turn the compost once a fortnight, that really is helpful. But I'll be quite honest, there's certain times of year I don't bother at all. And equally, if you have physical reasons why it's difficult to keep turning compost, you don't need to worry about that too much, providing that you've got holes in the bottom of your compost bin. Nature will just deal with it for you. You can just literally pour this stuff, you know, the raw material, into one compost bin and leave it, and eventually it will just rot down. Obviously, as a gardener, you're wanting to make use of it much faster than that, so that's why we do the turning. But yeah, one bin will work, and I'll be honest, I use it for a very long time. Obviously, 3 bins takes up quite a bit of space if you've got bigger bins, so it really is. I say these ones with the door in the front, you can literally just keep layering everything up and then say scooping stuff out from the bottom. So does that answer the question, Chris?
I'm satisfied, yes. If anyone wants any follow-up, please put it in the chat, and Nick's happily typing away, answering questions there as well.
Okay, so I'll go and sit down and relieve the cameraman of his duties, and actually I'll send him off to make me a cup of tea. So thank you.
I'd just say the wind isn't so good, so if you can find the most sheltered spot you can, that would be really beneficial.
Okay, I'll go back to where I was, and if that...
Thank you, Jim. That was good camera work.
Just a second. Sorry, Chris, I'm slightly struggling. I can't see me. Just bear with me a second.
I think we're all getting used to how technology works. There we go. That's good.
I still can't see me on the screen, so I don't know what you can see.
We can see, if you sit back, we can see you fine. Perfect.
Okay, and what's that like for the breeze? I've moved slightly, but
it seems okay for now, but I'll let you know if it gets too wild. Okay.
So let's have a little chat about what you can and can't put in compost. We tend to sort of separate the material out and talk about nitrogen rich or carbon rich, or another way of phrasing it is wet and dry material, or some people call it green and brown. I tend to think in terms of wet and dry, and the reason we sort of separate them out is that they work 2 different functions in the compost in terms of creating it. The nitrogen rich, the wet material, adds sort of a lot of nutrients to the compost, and really sort of makes it sort of, well, it makes it rich. The dry material helps add some bulk to that, and helps to stop it becoming slimy and quite unpleasant when you're using it. So in terms of wet material, so I've sent this list to Chris, I'm going to share it with everybody.
I think the wind is a little bit wild, actually. It keeps coming and going. Maybe can you sit in the polytunnel? Is that a thing?
I'm just thinking that will make quite a lot of flapping sound. If you bear with me, I'll actually probably go into the house.
Yeah, I think that might be best.
Okay.
If Nick, if while we're waiting for that, Nick, if you want to come on and answer the questions through voice there. There's a couple there. How frequently should return the compost? Oh, actually, he's answered that. But if you want to answer something rather than type while Anne gets into the house, please feel free.
Sure. Yeah. So I've answered that question, haven't I? I hope sufficiently. Yeah, with respect to how much you need to turn the compost. So I think you need to do it by eye, really. So essentially, you don't want really big clumps of high nitrogen material. So the stuff what Anne was describing there. So yeah, material that's very wet and is likely to create sort of anaerobic conditions. You really want to break that up and mix that in with your high carbon material, so your cardboard and your sticks or whatever, and that will help with the aeration anyway. So yeah, I think a 50-50 ratio is very good. That's generally what I use. But yeah, just do it by eye really, and just be very consistent in adding sticky or cardboard like material as you go, so you haven't got big clumps of your kitchen waste, which is no good for quick decomposition. But yeah, as long as you're strict with that, you shouldn't have to turn it like very frequently, and it is quite laborious. So yeah, you want to reduce how much you're having to do that. What is the question next? Buying worms if your garden is fairly bereft of them. So yeah, that's to be honest, I'm not entirely sure which type of worms, but Anne might know. But our soil in our garden is very bereft of worms, because we think I mean, we live in an old barracks, and we think the MOD or whatever, we're using it as a I think it was used as a midden, and there might be something wrong with the soil. We don't know, but basically there are very few worms in there. But something we've been doing is to do sheet mulching. So and touched on it. So that's when you're composting in situ, so where you're going to grow. So you could have, they call it lasagna gardening. So yeah, you have like layers of different materials. So you've got your cardboard, you've got if you can find any well rotted horse manure, and material like even your kitchen waste as well, and leaf litter, stuff like that. And that's really good as well, because you're helping the sort of soil ecosystem. And we've seen a lot of improvement in terms of how many worms are in the soil, so that's been really good. We've also done hugelkultur beds, which are like mounds, I suppose. You sort of dig into the ground and then fill it with kitchen waste, but also like rotting logs and prunings from your garden, and then just cover that with compost, and that's really good for worms as well. But yeah, I guess it's the mixture again of your high carbon and high nitrogen material that's attracting, because the carbon like material sort of improves the soil structure as well, and that's great. Yeah, it's good, just good for your worms. But yeah, we've tried and tested both of these, and they're really good for worms. So. Yeah. Can you put wood ash in the compost? Yeah, I would say yeah, definitely. But you just want to make sure it's not like been treated with anything horrible. If it's like older wood, it will contain arsenic in the wood preservative, so that's definitely something you want to avoid. But yeah, if it's just like logs that haven't been treated, absolutely, yeah, that's really good stuff. Yeah.
We've also got lawn moss. Can we put lawn moss in there?
Yep, I put again, as far as, sorry, I'm back. Nick, do you want to
carry on? You started, so you'll finish.
Yeah, I was going to say something about sort of grass cuttings and things like that. As Nick was saying, you're really looking for a 50-50 mixture of things. And so lawn moss, I think I'd seen a question there about, can you put non-organic material in there? I'm presuming you mean like vegetable peelings that aren't organic originally. Yeah, you can. But what you're looking for is 50-50, and if you're using lawn cuttings, grass cuttings and lawn moss, what you mustn't put in really are anything that you've treated with weed killers. So if you've treated it with moss killer, don't then go and put that into your compost bin. I think the easiest way to think about it is everything that you put in there, you will then actually recycle into your garden soil. So if you're recycling that into your vegetable patch, anything that you put in there will then get absorbed into the vegetables, and of course then you'll eat it. So what you're looking to do is not put things in there that you don't want to eat. Like Nick was saying, you know, if it's wood ash that's got nasty chemicals in it, you don't want the carrots that you're growing later in the season to be absorbing that. Likewise, if you've used you might be doing flower gardening rather than vegetable gardening and thinking, well, I'm not going to eat them. But if you've put weed killer on your lawn and then put it into your compost bin, that doesn't break down. You then put it onto your flower bed, and basically what you're doing is you're just killing the flowers, because the chemicals in there won't break down very easily. They will eventually, but they don't very easily. So if you've used weed killers or anything like that, then don't. And the other problem as well is, again, Nick was sort of saying about their garden's a little bit bereft of worms, and the more the soil builds up, the more sort of worms and other insects will appear. But you need to be careful as well about not putting things into the compost that will actually damage the worms. I'm saying if you've got a lot of citrus, that worms don't like it, so they won't, or onion apparently, but so try and avoid that in great quantities. The other thing is horse manure and cow manure is notoriously excellent for helping your plants and feeding them, but animals get wormed to stop intestinal worms, and when you get horse manure, the worms that kill the intestinal worms in the animals will also kill your garden worms. So don't put that straight into your compost or straight onto your garden. It will break down eventually, but just keep that compost to one side for a while before you mix it in. I don't really know how long to leave it to one side. What I tend to do is put it in a separate pile and then allow the worms to break in there. And then once they do, you know that it's safe to then put into the compost. You'll actually see worms in the manure. So as I say, I've got a quick list here in terms of wet or green material. So any fruit and vegetable peelings, grass clippings, nettle leaves are very good as well, and very nitrogen rich. You can put annual weeds in there, but not the seeds, because say like the dandelion clock, if you start putting dandelions in, you will then sort of spread them everywhere. Tea bags or tea leaves, I'd say that probably constitutes quite a lot of our compost. I do like a cup of tea, so you can soon sort of build up a compost bin with tea leaves. Coffee grounds, including the filter paper if it's not a plastic one.
Well, and sorry, a lot of tea bag, the material contains plastic. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm sure you know that, but yeah, I mean, does that do you put all tea bags in?
I do, although
yeah.
I did notice that the tea bags tend to rot down, so I do tend to sort of try and buy. I'm increasingly using loose tea, but I noticed a while ago when I was turning the compost, somebody had put these very posh, expensive tea pigs, and they certainly don't rot down. So I think maybe the moral there is cheap tea's better, loose tea's even better.
Yes,
but yeah, I think you do have to be very careful. It's amazing how much plastic that you don't think gets into the system. Again, sometimes I see little elastic bands that have got into the compost, and you know, again, they're not breaking down, and so I think you do have to be careful at that point where you're throwing it into your whatever your initial container is on your windowsill. Just try and filter out there. And as I say, you saw me out there, it's easy. I put my empty planters when the season's ended, tip all that into my compost bin. I always try and keep the little sort of labels separate, but it's amazing how many get back into the compost. It's quite good in that when you're doing it in your own garden, when it starts to break down, the ones that you missed, you can still sort of pick out and save. So, yeah.
I hope you don't mind if I answer a couple of these questions.
Yeah.
How do you know when your compost is ready to use? So it shouldn't smell very intense because the ammonia element, I suppose, of a lot of the nitrogen-rich material would have been converted by the bacteria. So it shouldn't have a really intense smell anymore. In fact, it should smell pretty much neutral. The texture is important as well. It should be quite friable. Obviously very dark, quite uniform in consistency. And that in terms of the timing of that will vary as to how warm and moist the conditions that you've created. And I guess that leads quite well on to the next question. In terms of a cover, covers can be very good because it's obviously good for retaining heat, which is good for the decomposition process. And it also, although you want to keep it wet, if it's very wet, then that will cause it to become anaerobic potentially. So that will really reduce the rate of decomposition. For all the little creatures inside, I don't like it to be too wet because you can't actually breathe. So covers good, yeah, definitely. Whether it's in a sunny spot or not, I think that's a really good idea. I think that's well, someone's added something about tea bags. Okay, yeah. So tea bags, I guess any company that sells them will be very explicit in terms of whether their tea bags contain plastic. I don't know why some of them do, because it's possible not to, isn't it? So
yeah.
It's I think a lot of it's to do with sealing the bags, so it's contained in the glue of the bags.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Yeah. So somebody's just put on there about lots of ants in the compost. I'll be quite honest with you, I don't know what you think as well, Nick, but the compost bin, as far as I'm concerned, is a little microclimate, little ecosystem all of its own. And I say, unfortunately, we've had to come in because of the wind, but if I was out there now, I can guarantee that our song thrush will be having a pick through it for the snails, and various other birds will be there for the ants and everything else. All of the creatures in there are doing something. They're either eating, like the worms are eating their way through the stuff and basically pooing it back out again and making compost. Others are chomping down other things. They're making little nests in there. I say, if you've got young kids, at the risk of sounding like a complete nerd, the compost bin's absolutely fascinating. So sometimes you will find that one particular creature will sort of dominate. You might have, let's say, if you've got a lot of ants at the moment, they're in there doing something, and there's certainly a bird out there that eats ants. So don't worry too much about it, is always my
green woodpeckers. They love ants, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I found grass snakes in my compost before.
Wow.
Just loving the heat.
Yeah.
In the spring, yeah. Quite amazing.
Yeah.
I want to put anyone off. There's a potential, yeah.
And again, I mentioned mice a little bit earlier. We're back onto fields, so we do get field mice in the compost bin. Now, whenever I move the compost bin and they're in there, it makes me jump. They're never in compost bin 1. They're always in 2 or 3, where it's much drier and creates a nice cosy home. And it tends to be, again, more in winter. Again, like Nick was saying, you'll have different seasons and different speeds of compost making. In winter, the compost bin is a nice, cosy, warm place to live. Now, again, I don't worry too much about it. We're lucky that, you know, we've got sort of a garden where we're not right next door to neighbours, and so you know, the field mice don't worry me at all. I see them as, you know, we've got lots of birds of prey around here. Field mice are food for them, and certainly at the start of the gardening season, we could smell a fox around our garden, again, they'll eat that. So the compost bin creates a fantastic little ecosystem for all of the wildlife.
Yeah, and you can always position them a bit further away, can't you, from your house, which is always a good idea, really.
Yeah. But yeah, grass snake would be fantastic to find in there.
Yeah.
If you've got a lot of ants, my view is don't worry about it too much. If you've got a lot of anything, don't worry. Nature will balance itself out eventually, providing, say, you're keeping the compost not too wet or not too dry.
Yeah. So another question is it necessary to water the compost? You shouldn't really need to if you've got a consistent input of particularly vegetable waste from your kitchen. Should be okay, and having a cover as well will be beneficial. But you may need to if it's really like drought conditions, I suppose. Yeah, and you haven't.
I think that's where you are, and we've sort of only had to think about 1 or 2 days of rain since the beginning of April, and I'm finding the compost is incredibly dry, so I have needed to water it. Some gardeners as well sort of say to wee in the compost. The ammonia in urine can help break it down, but again, there's a little bit like, where do you site your compost bin? Think about your neighbours if you are going to wee in your compost, but it's also meant to as well deter sort of rats or mice if you do wee in the compost.
That's almost a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? But
yeah.
Because I'll also say it depends on what you've taken in before you wee on your compost as well.
Yeah.
Composter accelerator liquid. I'm not sure what that is. Do you know what that is?
I've seen that in garden centres. My view is don't waste your money on it. If you just put in a good mix of materials in there, and just a little bit of garden soil as well. The garden soil actually has a lot of the microorganisms in there that you need to accelerate the soil. We didn't, again, because we've come in, I've lost my thread slightly. If you layer compost, that will accelerate it anyway. So a layer of the garden, your kitchen waste or material is actually quite wet and sloppy, so wet nitrogen rich material. Then put a layer of something drier, so that can be straw, drier grass clippings, dry leaves, bits of twigs, even bits of paper, cardboard, egg boxes, and that'll create a dry layer. And then if you just sprinkle some soil on top of that, some of your own garden soil, again, you mix it in the organisms there, and it will go away quite happily by itself. I certainly wouldn't waste money on accelerator. And also turning it regularly will speed it up and give you some good at the same time.
Just ask, you made reference to garden soil there. Do you mean soil from your garden or the stuff you buy from the garden centre?
No, literally the stuff that's lying on the ground where you're going to plant things. I say that makes a really good accelerator, because what you're doing is you're actually putting your microorganisms from your own garden into your own compost, and you're not sort of creating a separate sort of ecosystem there. Everything that's there is just generating more of. So
there's no potential, I suppose, for introducing unwanted fungal pathogens or something. With that kind of,
Keep talking about ecosystems. Nick, when we were talking the other day, you made a really good point, and made a mental point to make sure we cover it today. One of the things you're trying to do with compost is generate a richness for your soil and to help your plants. But what you mustn't do is damage another ecosystem in the process of that. So leaves make a really nice dry material for your compost. But also, if I have a hedgerow, a beech hedge, and I never collect the leaves from under it, I just let them fall and stay there, it does create a fantastic little environment anyway. It's absolutely thick with worms and various other things, so I don't disturb that. But equally, in spring, or across in autumn, when the breeze is blowing and leaves are blowing absolutely everywhere, if they're collecting around my plant pots, I'll pick those leaves up and put those in the compost. But don't disturb another ecosystem to create one. again, I have a nettle patch at the corner of my garden. Nettles are a wonderful plant. You know, they're great for attracting insects that are beneficial to your garden. They also, I find that the butterflies are quite happy to go and lay their eggs and their caterpillars in the nettles rather than on my vegetables. But again, nettle leaves are really rich and make a fantastic addition to your compost bin. So it's about, yeah, somebody just put up there, nettles are amazing to eat and make tea as well. So yeah, don't disturb too much. Use some nettle leaves, perhaps from the ones that are grown where you don't want them, but equally always try and have some somewhere in your garden.
Yeah. Yeah. So the painting your wooden compost bin. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't see too much issue in that, unless it's. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't paint the inside of it. Paint the outside.
I would add to that. Make sure that it's a water-based paint, probably more than an oil-based paint. Just check the ingredients. I think I might be wrong on this, so don't quote me on this, but I think the chalk paints are usually quite benign. I think that they should be okay to use. But I would certainly emphasise what Nick said there. Then paint the outside and try and stay away from the inside as much as possible. Because there'll still be some colorings and chemicals within that you probably don't want to be going into your vegetables. But doing it on the outside, it should be okay. And what I would also say is try and find something to seal it as well. Because if you've got a water-based paint and it rains, then the paint will potentially run into the compost. So if you can seal it, then that would be okay. But I think generally, if it's a water-based paint, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But maybe do a bit of further research on that yourself as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Chris. So someone sent in, sorry, Anna and Eva sent in a question. We have an old compost bin that hasn't been used for years. Do I need to clean it before starting new compost? I assume if it was only used for compost before, which yeah, it'd be fine. Particularly if it's dried, and if it was used in your own garden, then I don't see any need to clean it really. No, it would be my answer to that. I don't know if Anne, you think differently.
No, again, my compost bin one, the one where I put all the wet material, was an old barrel that was in the garden when we moved here. I think it's an old plastic sherry barrel. I'm not quite sure how our garden ended up with a sherry barrel in it, but anyway, I just sliced the bottom off that, and because it had been a sherry container, I didn't worry about it. But again, if it was a plastic container that a barrel that maybe had some other sort of, I don't know, oil or something in it, I'd probably give that a good clean. But otherwise, yeah, I think the sort of, maybe the rule of thumb is, if you wouldn't want it sprinkling on your vegetables, then don't put it in your compost. If you're going to be painting your bin or whatever, if you weren't really wanting to paint your vegetables with it, then don't paint your compost bin with it, because it will bleach out in some way.
Yeah, and if it isn't drawn in by the plants, then it will affect something else, like the your soil biota, your worms and whatever. So yeah, that's a really good mentality to have. Yeah.
I think as well.
Perhaps as far as painting goes, you could maybe look for like natural dyes, vegetable dyes, and things like that, or maybe even make your own dyes. You can make dyes from charcoal and turmeric, and probably paprika will make a nice reddy coloured one, and then you're also keeping more like earthy colours as well. An idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And again, in the sort of DIY shops, it does sort of tell you on various materials if it can be used. So I would check the labels and check the manufacturer's guidance for such things. But I suppose you'd only really be painting it if it was to make it look nicer, or for the fun of it. For again, if you were making a little saw something on sort of a site the other day that was painting them for children to make like a little bird restaurant. So once you took that off and all the insects were there, the birds would come along and eat them. So it'd just be for fun, really. But yeah, I tend to be a gardener, so I don't paint anything unless it needs it.
Yeah. So we made a pallet compost actually in a transition workshop. Yeah, that was, I think Lynn's was there actually. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, obviously, if the wood was in contact with the compost all the time, it would rot. But we were lucky to have some some plastic sheeting that we've been able to cover that with, which should preserve it a bit better. And that you know that obviously plastic isn't ideal, but we're not painting it with some sort of horrible varnish or something like that. Yeah, I see the mixture of those two. It's not ideal, and it will eventually get into the compost as well, which is no good. Yeah, you're lucky to have that just lying around, that plastic sheeting. But yeah. One other thing is we've talked a lot about like nitrogen and the importance of that for your plants. But what we've been doing this year is we're making a compost tea from Comfrey, which is a very common plant you find growing often as a undesirable plant because it's just so prolific. It's perennial and it seems to be able to survive anything, any amount of ripping it out. But that contains it has a really good nutrition sort of profile for your plants. But one thing it contains a lot of is potassium, and that's really good for your fruiting. Things like tomatoes really love it, and that helps them ripen the tomatoes. Whereas nitrogen is better for sort of leaf growth, as I understand it. But basically, if you have a container with a tap on, is ideal. But you just fill that full of the Comfrey leaves. And this is a good time of year to harvest as well, because it won't. Certainly, more common types of Comfrey won't be in flower. So you want to catch them before they flower, because the leaves contain more of those beneficial nutrients. But yeah, you submerge that in water, and then we've just sort of compressed it with a rock in a big big container, and takes about a few months to rot down, and then you add that as a liquid feed to your crops, and it will really help them once they've sort of developed their leaves and they're starting to produce fruit. Yeah, it can be really good, but it really smells bad. I don't know if you've used it.
Yeah, it does smell pretty.
Yeah.
It's pretty, like you say, it's pretty amazing stuff. And again, sort of thinking about sort of gardening and the environment and also sort of money. You can spend an absolute fortune in garden centres on these fancy plant foods and various materials and things, but I say this is free. Comfrey, like I say, grows everywhere quite happily once it gets going, and your plants will absolutely love it. Again, banana skins in the compost, that's another one for sort of particular foods. So these are things that you can actually just put straight back in. And somebody's put a question there about compostable bags. Do you know, that's really interesting. I put some compostable bags in my compost bin and they didn't compost down. So sorry, I've lost a bit of sound there.
Sorry. I think they're designed for like the council composting. So yeah, the high heat, but they seem to take forever, don't they? In your hand compost, cold compost, yeah. Yeah,
but again, I've learned a lot just from trial and error. So it might be just that my compost is particularly dry. So we're in a dry area, and that takes a bit longer for them to rot down. Give it a try. If it doesn't work, pick them out, put them in the council composting bin, and let the heat systems deal with it. We're sort of talking as if there's hard and fast rules here. I think the only real hard and fast rules are make sure, like I said, make sure you don't put things in there that you don't want your vegetables reabsorbing. Other than that, you know, just have a go. The worst that can happen is you'll end up with a slightly slimy compost, or a too dry compost, and it'll take too long. You know, you can just have a go, and away you go. There's different, I say, what the speed at which compost will build in my garden as well might be different to in somebody else's. So just go with it is my advice. Have a go. You've not a lot to lose.
I just want to answer a question that Gillian Arthur put up there. This is probably more for me. Is it possible to share this workshop with other people? I am recording the workshop, and it will be available through Transition Sterling's channels at some point in the near future. Also, I'll add as well, if after this anyone thinks of a question that they didn't ask, then please feel free to email me through the email that I've sent all the information out from so far. It's chris@transitionsterling.org.uk, and then I can feed that on to Nick and Anne, and they will be able to answer any questions for you, and then I'll return the question to you as well. So at the end of this workshop, the learning is by no means over, and there's plenty of information. Perhaps Anne and Nick know some particularly good sources for gardening. I don't know about anyone else, but I absolutely love Gardener's Question Time. You learn loads of things from that. It's a wonderful program. I'm not really an avid gardener, but it's something about it is relaxing. It's like a nice bubble of joy in an otherwise sometimes challenging world.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, and another thing to think about is we talk about compost as if it's one thing, and sometimes what people mean are those plastic bags of material that you buy from the garden centre. Now, there's sort of material that you might need to. I can't generate enough compost in my compost bin to fill all of my plant pots for my sort of flowers and things like that. So I do have to sort of supplement that with growing material. What I'd say is always make sure you try and avoid peat-based material. Jim is a keen bird watcher, and we spent a lot of our sort of time seeing areas that have a peat-based ground just destroyed, and obviously the wildlife and birds that are there. Again, the council, from the hot composting that they do, will, quite a few of them, sell back the material for quite a good price. I say certainly in our area we can go and get some, and that is again helpful in that you're not putting in lots of sort of miles in terms of that. So what I throw into our council compost bin goes to the local centre, gets hot composted, and I can buy it back. It's not going very far. But if I'm going to the local DIY store and buying one of those big plastic bags of stuff, I don't know where that's been brought from. I've got another plastic bag, and again, you know, it's really, I think it's trying to avoid that as much as possible. But I do accept that, you know, you do sometimes need additional growing material to add to your composting plant pots and things like that. In the actual garden, you shouldn't compost. So we're just two of us. All that stuff in the bins that you saw out there has generated from my garden and from our kitchen. And it's amazing when you're having your 5 a day, how quickly you can generate quite a lot of sort of vegetable peelings and fruit apple cores, etc. And I say it soon builds up.
I've just sent a link to a really good guide for gardening without pesticides from the Pesticide Action Network. Really good for just avoiding having to buying things like glyphosate and these just really damaging chemicals that we should obviously avoid. But
again, I think sorry, I feel really passionate about that as well. And it's amazing when you actually see what a compost bin generates in terms of insects and how that brings the birds in. So I was out there the other day and we've got a pair of song thrush who use the garden, and they had munched their way through quite a lot of snails. There was sort of empty snail shells everywhere. Now we get a lot of snails in our garden, but you know, since we've had the birds sort of helping keep control of those, you know, it's great. I don't use anything to actually get rid of snails. Again, I think I feel very, you actually need that balance. You need all of those things in there, and just accept that you will lose some things to snails. We lose quite a few things to our local pigeons, but you know, they've all got a place in there.
Yeah, I guess the paradox is that you need a certain density or number of these pests like aphids and stuff, you know, to actually attract your ladybirds or your crows in this case. So yeah, just producing a bit more than perhaps you need to allow for some losses is necessary. Yeah, and if things aren't eating your plants, then your garden isn't part of the ecosystem as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a good quote out there somewhere. I can't think of it right now, but
I heard that one as well. I think it was on someone's Facebook page.
Yeah. So it's, I think again, the other sort of nice thing is don't get too het up about it all. Sit back, sit with a cup of tea, watch what's sort of wandering through the garden. And again, you know, if you are sort of creating a good ecosystem there, it's glorious to sit there and listen to the birds singing. And say just seconds before we started, there was it's obviously sort of breeding season at the minute, so there was a pair of male blackbirds locked in battle, possibly over a female. There was sort of sparrows dust bathing, where I'm sort of planning doing some planting later. There's always sort of half a dozen birds sitting in the bird bath. And say we have various other sort of creatures meandering through as well, sort of the fox and an enormous pheasant sort of took residence at one point. So you know, again, if you're doing this, it's an absolute pleasure to sit there and watch, and you know, it's upsetting to think about pesticides and things being put into your garden. So just try and avoid doing it. Say there's nothing nicer than sitting there with a cup of tea, watching bees buzzing around your garden. So just enjoy it, and I say there will be some loss. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Okay. I get a feeling that we're sort of coming to the end there. But if anyone's got any questions, or if anyone wants to add anything to what you've heard there, or want any clarification on anything, then please do so now. I was wondering, Nick, if you would like to just say just a little bit more about the hoop culture bed that you were making, and just sort of like the basic details of how to do that. That would be kind of nice, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I'm just going to write the name. So I think it was an Austrian. Was it Austrian?
Composer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an Austrian guy that invented it, and he does have a sort of you know, a specific design that you can follow. But what's his name? Sorry, Rosie? Sepp Holzer, I think. So I think that's it. Anyway, what we did was to we dug about 30 centimeters, and yeah, just in a sort of rectangle, I suppose, maybe 3 meters by 1 meter, and I got it. Yeah, I got it right. That is his name. Yeah. And then we just filled it with logs that were decomposing, and then like things like comfrey stems that we just had loads of them dying in our garden from the previous year, and then some raw kitchen waste as well, because we were going to grow squashes in there, which can tolerate ridiculous what they can tolerate. But yeah, they like a lot of nitrogen basically. And then we covered that material with the logs, the kitchen waste and various other garden cuttings and stuff with compost and the soil that we dug from the top as well. And then we covered it actually, because we did it in the winter. We covered it with cardboard to make sure that not too much of the soil was lost for erosion by rain. And and then planted some squash in it recently, but unfortunately the cold weather killed them. But we've got loads more. That's fine. But, it's about layering. It's about again including material that has that's high carbon, high nitrogen as well. And I think some level of compaction is good as well, because you don't want too many crevices between your logs. So make sure the soil is patted down well. That's all I can say on it really. I'm sure someone else on there probably knows more about it than me, but yeah, it's really good. It's really good for your worms and the logs actually. They help to retain moisture as well. One other thing I guess I would say is if your garden is sloping, don't have it sort of along the contour, if you see what I mean, in alignment with the contour of that hill gradient, so not perpendicular to. Am I describing it well?
We want it perpendicular, or we want it parallel to
you want it so not parallel to the contour line, if you see what I mean. So
so a right angle to the slope of the hill.
It could be a right angle or angle. Sorry, not sorry.
See if the hill's doing that.
Yeah.
You want it way A or way B?
Not B.
Not B. So A.
Kind of between the two really is ideal, because you don't.
C.
Basically, because you don't want the runoff from the rain accumulating and concentrating too much on one side of your agriculture bed. You want it sort of, at least that's what Sepp Holzer, guy I've mentioned.
Wait, what if you're building it on a flat, just any which way?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But well, actually, if it's a south aspect, you probably want it facing south, if you see what I mean, from top to bottom, if it's a rectangle and not horizontal to it, because you want the sun shining equally on both sides. Yeah, I don't think I've been very good at describing that, but yeah.
I think we got it.
Yeah, that's all I have to say on it. But yeah, check out Sepp Holzer and his designs. I don't think there's much sort of scientific evidence to suggest that it's actually significantly and helps plant growth, but it makes sense to me. It's good at retaining moisture and also really good for squashes as well, because they tend to succumb to rotting of the leaves. So you generally grow them on sort of mounds. So you've created a mound already. It's composting in situ, and it really help them grow, because they love that lots of nutrients and to be a bit off the ground, I suppose. Yeah, not too much in contact with the ground moisture. Yeah. I haven't heard of bokashi composting.
I haven't either.
Away you go, Claire.
Hiya. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a type of fermenting composting. Apparently you buy a kit, and it has a bucket, and it has some like a fermenting mixture. But the thing about it is that you can add other kitchen waste, like meat and fish and etc., into it, and it's a very quick composting method. It's meant to be good for people that stay in flats and things like that, because it's just quite a small, fast system of composting. But I don't know if you have to buy this fermenting mixture every time as you're going along, or if it's just a kind of starter kit and then you're good to go. I haven't had a go at it yet, but it's something that sounds a bit interesting.
I've not, as I say, I've not come across that before, but quite a few years ago, I tried sort of a wormery system. I'll be honest, I wasn't very successful with it. That doesn't mean it's not successful. I wasn't successful with it. It's a different thing altogether. But yeah, worth trying it. That sort of made me think, though, again, if you're in a sort of flat or don't have access to a garden, there's something I saw the other day about composting groups. So again, people who live nearby, sort of sharing compostable material. And that might be a way forward. Again, the idea of putting meats and things in troubles me slightly, because the idea of how it might smell. But again, if it's a contained system, that might be fine. It's not something I'm familiar with, so I can't really say any more about it. But and again, I sort of think about the cost of it as well. I don't know how much it is to set up, but yeah, worth looking into. But so I don't have any knowledge about it.
Yeah, now the reason I was looking at it is that where I'm living, they don't have a food waste collection here for, you know, meat and fish and things like that. We don't have a food collection here, so, and I just hate that, you know, just putting that in the normal waste. So I was trying to figure out something to do with it.
Yeah, good plan.
I'll let you know how I get on.
Maybe it's another workshop, that one.
Thanks.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to go.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for your help.
Yeah.
If anyone does have any construction questions about building things, I'm sure I could probably field those ones. But thank you very much for that, Nick.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, the video. Yeah. It's quite self-explanatory, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's a very, very easily followable video. Yeah.
Sorry, I have to leave.
That's all right. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. Right. See you all
bye.
soon.
So does anyone else have any further questions that they would like to ask about anything? No? Okay, well, good. So I think, I guess we can call that an end now. But just before you go, I just want to just want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you to Anne and Nick, of course. And thank you all for coming along too. It has been a bit of a learning curve bringing these events online. I mean, the benefit of doing it on site is that you can get hands-on, but I guess the added benefit of this is that we can have more people joining from all over. We've got from the Azores to London to Stirling and everywhere in between at the minute. So that's really really impressive. Like I said before, if you've got any further questions that you want to ask, email me or email Transition Stirling or Facebook message Transition Stirling, and then you can ask your questions and I'll field them to the experts and ask them on. Check out Facebook groups. There's tons of groups on gardening and composting. There's a group for everything. Check out your local community garden as well. There's tons of community gardens. I mean, they're probably all locked down at the minute, but it's worth getting in contact with them right now as well. I know a couple of you have allotment patches as well, so get out there and put into practice some of the things that you've learned here as well. I'll send an email out with with the checklist that Anne has made for you of things that you can and can't put into your compost bins or piles. And I'm going to send out a flyer about good food choice. It's a flyer that we've made as Transition Sterling, which might have some interesting and useful information in there for you. Can I just ask a question about, so it's come to my attention through here that Eventbrite didn't send a link through to you. You didn't get a link through for the Zoom meeting when you completed your registration for Eventbrite. Is that no one? No one? No, okay. That's I apologize for that. I thought I had put that in there, so I'm having to learn as I go along there. I know a couple of people struggled to find the link there, so apologies for that. Although it is recorded, so you can watch this back at a later date. I'll try and get that up there as soon as possible. Oh, one person did. Alison got a link through. So that's strange. It's strange that some didn't when I signed up. Okay, well I'll look into that and make sure that it's obvious where it goes next time, and I'll put it in the Eventbrite description next time. The only thing that I didn't want to put it in the Eventbrite description, just I don't know why I didn't. I think it felt to me like you should be able to sign up once you've signed up, if that makes sense. Anyway. I'll email out a feedback form as well. If you could fill that in, that would be really good, because that allows me to see what you like, what you didn't like, what worked, what didn't work, and it helps me to continually update the events and just make them as good as they can be. And then in about a month's time or so, I'll send you out again that survey that you did at the start. And if you can redo that without looking at your answers from before, that would be good, because then we can sort of see what sort of impact this workshop has had. And finally, if you do, when you do put this into practice and start making your own compost, it would be amazing if you could share some photos with us, either through Facebook or through into my email, so we can make a post, or any other. I think we've got a Twitter account as well and an Instagram account, so check us out on Twitter and Instagram too. But the whole thing about Transition Sterling is community and bringing community in. And if we can see that what we're doing is making a positive impact on the community and your local area, it's really what we do it for. Essentially, like we can see that we're making a positive impact in many areas. So please share photos if you do. And if I can't remember who was asking, but someone was asking about painting a compost bin. If you paint your compost bin with interesting colours and make it look really good, please send us photos of that and tell us how you did it. I'm making a huge. Oh, thank you, Gillian. I think that's everything on my checklist. Compost feedback form. Oh, one more thing as well. So another really amazing project that I need to share about at the minute that Transition Sterling is involved in, alongside the kitchen at 44, is the community fridge. If you're unaware of the community fridge right now, then absolutely check them out. What we're doing is taking food waste from supermarkets and cafes, and giving that away to people who want it. Essentially, it's not necessarily on a need basis. It's if you want to have a look at what we've got. We're getting things from Waitrose, from Sainsbury's, Co-op, Marks and Spencers, all the things that are either short dated or they can't sell for one reason or another. You can turn up to the community fridge, which is based in Stirling at 44 King Street, which is made in Stirling. And they're open, just changed their hours. I think it's 11 till 2, I think, something like that. You can just turn up and join the queue and take some food away. It's reducing food waste, which is 11:30 till 1. Thank you, Veronica. I know I've got a couple of volunteers here that that work for the community fridge, so huge round of applause to them as well, and everyone involved in that. It's an amazing project, and we've smashed our 2-year target within the first 3 months, I think, or first month even. I think it's partly because of the crazy times that we're in right now, but it's certainly showing that there is a massive need for this sort of thing. And if anyone's ever been around been around supermarkets where they're throwing out the food, it's quite heartbreaking really to see what's thrown out. So big up to the community fridge, and definitely check them out and see if you've got a community fridge in your local area if you're not in Stirling. It's good. There's always tons of bread, so if you ever need bread, definitely go and get the bread from them. Some good bread as well. Yeah, I've been in a couple of times, and it's amazing the types of bread that they're getting in there. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you on another workshop. Like I say, if you're not on the mailing list, or you don't think you're on the mailing list and you want to be, send me an email and I'll make sure you're added to that. So we'll send that out monthly. And any questions on any of that?
No.
Good. Well, it's good to see you all, and have a great day. I don't know if the sun's out where you are, but it's trying to peak out here. Now's a good time to start your compost bin. Okay, see you all later.
Bye. Bye.